Hello everyone, this is Knud for IoT Analytics, and I am going to tell you a little bit about Hannover Fair, which happened this week. I'm back in the office right now. I couldn't make the summary at the fair. It was so busy, hundreds of thousands of people. Hannover Fair, as I've said before, is becoming the industrial fair, and we had 3 people in Hanover this week. Today's Friday, and it's sort of the last day. I'm just back in the office, and I wanted to share with you my highlights. 5 things I want to talk about. One is my theme for the fair. The second thing is a couple of company updates that I spoke to. Third thing I have had a special focus on MES, Manufacturing Execution Systems. I want to share a couple of things on that. And the fourth thing is IoT interoperability, which I dig deeper into to understand what's really holding that up right now. And then a couple of miscellaneous points. So let's start with the first thing, the main theme. For me at Hannover Fair, really this year, it was about wide adoption of, or let me rather rephrase, a lot of case studies. Something we haven't seen in the last years. I think 3 years ago, it was really difficult to find IoT and digital case studies in the industrial context at Hannover Fair. The last 2 years, you had some. I think this year, you really were sort of overwhelmed with case studies. Everybody had good case studies to present. So that is not the issue anymore. We are moving away from a point where we are kind of asking ourselves, what are the case studies and which are the early ones that seem to be working, more towards other questions, because you can't really dig through all of those case studies anymore. I'm still going to highlight a few that I thought were quite good, but overall, I mean, I probably missed 99% of the case studies, so I don't think they're representative. Had a good chat with the guys from OSIsoft, OSIsoft being one of the suppliers of data historians for automation systems, and they are more and more integrating into cloud. They were at the Microsoft booth on Microsoft Azure. They had some interesting case studies. I looked at one of their case studies last year where they are optimizing the brewery process based on dynamic sensor readings. And this year they kind of showed a similar case, but for a German company called Henkel, which makes adhesives and also some consumer products such as detergents. But for the adhesives business, they did exactly a very similar case where in the process of making this adhesives, they have sensors, and these sensor readings tell you when you need to test the samples, when you need to change the setup, and it's exactly that saves the people on the process a lot of time to not stop the process when it's not necessary, or to take samples at a point where it's not necessary. I thought it was a good case, and it represents a lot of process industries where IoT helps in dynamically optimizing the overall process, because behind this is actually a dynamic machine learning. So I thought that was quite good. Another one, which is not new, but I had the chance to talk to them, is Schindler Elevators. Schindler is one of 4 big elevator companies in the world, and you're most likely, every viewer has been in a Schindler elevator at some point. And they were showcasing at the Huawei booth. Schindler has developed an IoT connected elevator, and you have to say every new elevator is now automatically IoT connected, and Huawei is basically enabling the connectivity with a box that sits on top of the elevator, and GE Predix actually supplies a large portion of the platform in the cloud and edge solution as well. And the guys from Schindler basically told me that they were very happy with that setup. GE's former CEO had actually been in touch with their CEO, and they kind of made that happen a couple of years back, and are now at a point where they're able to supply every new elevator with that connectivity. With that, they're kind of changing the setup, how you do your emergency calls. There's a new technology behind that. But obviously, the most interesting case is about the service technicians, enabling the service technicians via predictive services, but also via connected apps on their mobile phones and so on and so forth. This case is not unique because their competitors have something similar with different companies. But the elevator industry in general is quite far ahead, and was good to sort of hear that from Schindler. There were a bunch of other use cases I will not talk about. Second second topic, some company updates. The first one, Siemens. I have to say, Siemens being the big German industrial firms, you kind of can't miss it when you're in Germany at a fair. They are taking digital very serious, and I have to say they were kind of late in my mind when it came to IoT and introducing a platform, but now they're really charging ahead, full steam. You can see it, and one of their board members, Mr. Helmrich, was saying that they are seeing the first really good results. He was claiming that the MindSphere platform is the reason why the Q1 numbers were so good. I listened to one of their large Q&A sessions, and their motto for this year is implement now. They say basically now is the time to implement, and that's what they're telling their customers. The company, interestingly, now going forward, says they're focusing on three things. One is edge computing. I think that is all over the industry. A lot of people focus on that. The second is additive manufacturing, 3D printing. I can't really comment much further because I didn't go further into this year. And the third one, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is new communication technologies. And with that, Siemens is saying time-sensitive networks. And they're basically saying they're switching all their protocols, including OPC UA, including Profibus, which is their proprietary technology, to time-sensitive networks, which at the end of the day enables a new real-time protocol that goes beyond the factory floor or beyond the legacy equipment of the factory floor, so to say. Interestingly, I talked to Huawei, exactly the same thing. It's all about time-sensitive networking. So if those large use cases maybe were that one theme of the fair, I would say time-sensitive networking were perhaps somewhat surprisingly the second theme that became apparent at the fair. Apart from Siemens, well, there's much more. That Siemens had a huge booth. They're building their partner ecosystem. Is becoming very impressive. Lots of industrial firms have teamed up. It seems like all the big industrial machinery manufacturers are now part of their ecosystem. Compared to last year, huge difference. Also had a chat with PTC, for example. We've been highlighting PTC quite a lot. They're doing IoT platform software quite successfully. They showed a demo where they were showing basically how advanced their platform is. You can, when you click on it, when you click on machines, you can double click 5-6 layers deeper. They have connected it to their augmented reality offering, which by now seems really mature. When you kind of have an iPad and you hold it over the machine, it gives you the parameters, and it seems like this is not only in a demo setup anymore. It seems to work quite uniquely. You can just zoom in with your fingers on the thing and stuff like that. Quite impressive, and I think PTC also continues to have pretty good traction. They were talking about a number of factories there connecting with this technology, and they said they have a couple of customers for which customers with up to 100 or more factories for which they have now connected 70, 80 of their factories with this technology, which seems quite impressive. Third point I want to talk about is MES system, manufacturing execution systems. I did a deep dive this year into this topic. It's in the manufacturing context, an important piece of the element. Manufacturing execution systems, essentially the systems that run the machines below the ERP systems. And this has been an element that has been around for 20, 30, 40 years. And the question that I had, how is IoT platforms changing the setup? And so I talked to a lot of providers of MES systems, and the answers I got were extremely different. And that's something I thought was worth highlighting here. So on the one hand, I would say 2/3, if not even more, of the current providers of this software layer said that cloud and IoT platforms are not something they're interested in. They basically say, this cannot run on the cloud because it must be real time, and if it's on the cloud, it cannot be real time. It takes too long for that feedback loop. They say the customers don't want any of the data in the cloud. This is really important manufacturing data. And so they kind of, I would almost say, ignore some of this. And then, interestingly, there are a couple of them that kind of change their philosophy quite rapidly and embrace IoT and cloud. And I will highlight some of those. First of all, there is Siemens themselves. I don't want to advertise Siemens, but I think it's pretty clear they're taking that step. So the Siemens has always had an MES system, but they are moving this now to their MindSphere IoT platform, and Siemens has now started to have an MES offering in the cloud, which means that some modules which don't require that real-time aspect are in the cloud, while others are not. And when you talk to them, they clearly have a vision that in the future, all of that will be on a new architecture, with some of it being on the cloud and some of it on an edge, smart edge device that is clearly different to the way you have it now. So with that, they will be able to specifically target smaller companies who kind of can have that in the cloud, don't need to invest in the whole infrastructure, can have it on a service pay-per-use model, much cheaper than what they have today. And Siemens thinks they can win it that way. Interestingly, there's a couple of companies that go the same way. Highlighting two here, I talked to one which is Forcam, which is a German MES, has historically been an MES provider, very rapidly also switching to that IoT platform model, going in a very similar direction. And then the third company is Nisco, which is an MES provider, which is actually working together with Siemens to lift their MES system that they've had onto the Siemens MindSphere IoT platform, and basically with the same thing, saying that they can enable such different use cases, so much better visibility on the shop floor. It's at the end of the day, it's all about the data, being able to analyze a lot bigger data sets, and then obviously analyzing across different factories, something that you can't really do with a lot of the MES systems today. So that, I think, was worth highlighting. The fourth point I want to talk about is interoperability in IoT systems. And the thing there is, interoperability is always cited as one of the key inhibitors to wide IoT adoption. Now, I kind of thought, you know, why is it? What is happening? And what I'm seeing, what I've heard from my discussions with gateway companies, with platform vendors, and so on, is there's a couple of different elements to it, and one is currently being solved. One element is of normalizing all the different protocols and making sure that you speak one language when you send data up to the cloud. And I think on the lowest level, I talked to at least 3 or 4 companies that make that happen. And it seems like we are on a pretty good way there. Many of these speak between 60 and 200 different protocols already very natively. If you want to retrofit a lot of other older machines, you need to speak a bunch more protocols. But this is what these guys are focusing on, developing small connectors between the machine and their platform or gateway or software gateway, so that that is enabled. Again, there's probably a bunch of companies working on that now, including some of the big IoT platform vendors, but that doesn't seem to be the problem. Interestingly, one of the problems seems to be that when you then send it to the cloud, there's still a lot of confusion about how you authenticate that. You do have cloud companies that offer edge solutions, but the issue with that is they don't go far down enough to enable real good intelligence of distributing the message from the cloud to different elements at the bottom. So if you want to speak from the cloud to several machines on the shop floor, and you want that secured, it needs to go through several firewalls, and really sort of ensuring that that is authenticated in a smart way, plus it is somehow moderated so that you're not sending everything to everyone. That is where the challenge actually is today. I talked to a couple of startups that are doing a good job in there, notably C Labs and Cybers. I'm pretty sure there's some other people working on it. I heard that the OPC UA Foundation's security protocol addresses some of that, even though it's not widely used. We are getting there, but this is where the issues are today, and I thought that was worth highlighting. Coming to an end, two more things that I've come across that I thought were interesting from an IoT point of view. First of all, I asked a couple of the guys there, what about China? I have very little visibility into China, or have had little visibility into China in the past. The answers were A, there are as many IoT platform vendors in China as there are in the English-speaking world, and that was both confirmed by some of the larger IoT vendors that are also active in China, as well as basically the IoT platform vendors. And that kind of means there's a lot of small startups and firms in China that have similar offerings as here, but we don't see it in the English-speaking world, it seems. Next step for me is to try to find out a little bit better who is this, what are they really doing. And the second thing about China is how big will it be from an IoT point of view, and the view there was also very unique. China is going to be the biggest market simply because they have the most factories in the world which need to be connected from an industrial point of view, obviously. And in the next 3 to 5 years, everybody expects that China is where IoT will make the biggest impact. Last point, I think one interesting setup, and this is coming back to edge computing, is that edge computing can be performed by the cloud, by the platform vendor, but there's two new approaches which are worth highlighting, and these are the Edge X and the Edge Cross foundations, which were both present, which essentially both have a kind of an open source or community-driven model to developing a platform architecture that can compute on the gateway or close to the device, enabling this real-time aspect and also enabling or disabling security or privacy concerns, if you want. And both have about 100 members right now. The Edge X is driven from Dell and a few other companies in the US. The Edge Cross is something coming from Japan. And interestingly, both have an X or cross as their symbol, have both a very similar name, it's a kind of coincidence. And both are basically enabling that edge to cloud architecture. The one company I talked with Edge Cross was Mitsubishi. Yeah, it's Mitsubishi. They have an AI at the edge device based on this architecture. And when they say AI at the edge, it actually does mean that they're performing the machine learning, not only the algorithm, but actually even the learning on the device and not in the cloud, which seems kind of novel because I've always only heard so far the learning happens in the cloud, the model gets pushed on the edge. They claim they also do the learning at the edge. Now, I don't know if that's always necessary, but it's something that hardware can do, even though it's just starting to be introduced to the market. I thought that was worth highlighting. Overall, great fair. You should go if you haven't been. If you were there and we missed each other, we should probably have a chat and see if next year or somewhere else we can see each other. I hope you found it insightful. Stay tuned and have a nice weekend.